Hello guys, and thank you for joining me. This is Wills, and today we are going to learn about grant writing. So grant writing is a skill that you can learn and master, and this will help you to win grants so fast. So if this is your first time on my channel, I'm kindly requesting you to like my video. You can also ask me questions in the comment section, and you can subscribe. I want you to subscribe to my channel so that you can continue getting more knowledge on grant writing. So in brief, this course is going to cover important aspects of grant writing. We are going to start by looking at the funding landscape, how to do research about the funding organizations, be they government or non-governmental organizations. Then I will also show you how to write an effective proposal that will help you win a grant very fast. I will also be sharing tips on how to increase your chances of winning a grant. So I will kindly ask you to stay tuned till the end of the course, and I will know in the end that you will gain significantly and your skills will improve, and you'll be able to be an effective grant writer. So without wasting too much time, let's dive into the details of this course. Guys, welcome back, and in this first lecture on grant writing, we are going to learn about the process of grant writing, and we are also going to learn about the purpose. Why do you need to understand grant writing? So objective number one is to understand the purpose of grant writing. Then number two is to understand the process of grant writing. So number one, what is the purpose of grant writing? Now, grant writing basically aims at securing funds. The purpose of a grant writer, or the work of a grant writer, is to help an organization, that is, it may be a profit or non-profit organization, to secure grants. Grants are funds, free funds that are not supposed to be refunded like loans. And organizations need funds so that they can continue serving the community. For example, if an organization is involved in health education, such an organization would require funding so that it may continue to carry out activities like outreach and going to the community to provide the information that is required to bring about change. So grant writing is basically a request for financial help from an institution, and mostly is the charitable foundations or through government funding. And it is important to use certain strategies so that the organization secures the funds. So in brief, we are going to look at the grant writing process. Now, grant writing is a step-by-step process, and it involves a number of people. Number one, we have the grant writer. Then the second party, we have the organization that is looking for funds. Then we have the third party, which is the organization that is providing the funds. So the work of the grant writer is to execute this action plan, this step-by-step process of ensuring that his or her organization gets the funding. So in summary, there are steps. I've summarized the steps into seven of them. So number one, we have the problem identification. So for you to apply for funds, you must identify a specific problem that you want to solve. Your organization must be focused on a specific problem. For example, if it's a healthcare organization, a non-profit healthcare organization, and maybe it wants to focus on eradicating the problem of drug abuse or alcohol abuse. The problem of alcohol abuse or issues about alcoholism might be the specific problem that the organization is targeting to achieve or solve in a community. Then number two is finding grants. So as we've seen before, grants are given by organizations and you have to find these organizations. Mostly you'll find organizations, they have websites where they provide information about what they do and whom they are likely to give their grants. Then after finding grants, you are now on step 3 is to prepare a proposal. A proposal is what is submitted to the funder, and this the document that is it will clearly tell the funder what the problem is, how you intend to solve that problem, and what are the budgets. So once you have a proposal, the next step is to submit the proposal. You submit the proposal by submitting the document or filling an application to the funding organization. Then once your proposal is submitted, the next step is to review your proposal. The review process is done at the funding organization level, whereby there's a committee. Committee is in charge of reviewing the proposal, and it will determine whether the proposal will be approved or rejected. Then once your proposal, assuming that your proposal has been approved, the next step is to accept the offer. Then you'll be given funds. Then the next step will be to execute the project. So execution of the project, this is where you go to the field, start the activities that you initially stated in your proposal. Then once your project is complete, maybe it has taken 6 months or 1 year, the next step is to write a report and publish the outcomes. It is important to keep the funders informed about what happened and how you accounted for the money that you are given. So in brief, those are the 7 steps that you can follow in writing grants for your organization. So in summary, I would say that profit and non-profit organizations may be struggling financially, and the only way option is to seek for grants from charitable organizations. Now, grant writing will help such organization to secure funds from donors. Finally, grant writing should be approached systematically so that you maintain a level of consistency that is required to ensure that your organization gets the necessary funding that you require. So in brief, that's about the process in summary. So in the next lecture, we will be covering the different organizations and the types of funders and how you can do research. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next lecture. Welcome back, guys. Now, the second lecture is about understanding the funding landscape. So, in this lecture, you are going to learn about the different types of funders that give money to profit or non-profit organizations. Then you'll also be able to understand the sources of funding. So, number one, the types of funders. Now I'll go deeper by explaining or giving examples of organizations under each category. So number one, we have foundations. Now we have foundations that they give funds to non-profit organizations. A good example is the Ford Foundation. Now this organization will will donate funds to organizations that are involved in poverty eradication and things like injustice in the society. Then we have another common foundation by Bill and Melinda Gates. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation focuses on education, healthcare, and so on. So we have many other foundations out there. You can take time and do some search on Google, and you'll be able to come across more foundations that are giving funds to non-profit organizations. Then the second type of funders, we have the corporations. Corporations are normally profit-making organizations that are involved in business activities. So we have examples in this category. We have banks. For example, we have the Bank of America. It's involved so much in philanthropy and will give funds for education, health, and so on. We have another organization called the General Electric. It's also a corporation that will also give money to organizations that are involved in different community activities. Then we have Pepsi. Pepsi is also another philanthropic organization that is also giving funds to profit and non-profit organizations. So we have many other corporations. You can do search on Google and you'll be able to come up with more examples. Then we have government agencies. Government agencies are also involved in philanthropy. Now the biggest government, say the federal government gives grants to individuals and non-profit organizations. It can be for different purposes. We have areas such as education, healthcare, leadership, justice, and so on. So under government, we have other organizations like the National Institute of Justice. We have the CDC that is focused on matters about healthcare. Then lastly, we have the category of individual donors. Under individual donors, we have the rich people who have made profits from their business or their careers, and they are willing to give money. For example, we have individuals like Warren Buffett. We have people like Oprah Winfrey. We have sports personalities like Michael Jordan and many other individuals. You can also do a search on Google and you'll be able to come up with more examples in this category. So in brief, that gives you an overview of the types of funders you can expect when you are involved in grant writing. Then secondly, we have funding priorities. Now organizations will have priorities for funding well-deserving or organizations that merit. Now some of the areas of focus may be environmental conservation. We have organizations that are focused on healthcare. For example, we have the pharmaceutical companies like Johnson's and Johnson, Pfizer, and so on. Then we have other organizations, they focus on education. Others will focus on arts and sports. So it is extremely important to understand the funding priorities, what priorities are given by the funders. Then another important thing I want to talk about is the application process. Now, when you are applying for grants, you have to take note that each funder has its own process of applying for these grants. Now, some of the things that you need to be looking out are the requirements. Now, on the company websites, like if you go to Pepsi, or if you go to Johnson and Johnson, or if you go to the grants.gov website, you will find the requirements for making applications. What do you need? Some organizations will require the certificate of registration and so on, and any other document that you need to upload when you are doing the application. So it's important to read out the requirements and come up with a checklist so that when you are submitting your proposal, you ensure that you've met all the requirements. Then another important thing to note during application is the deadline. The deadline for application is very important. Organizations have a set aside time for every activity of their grant donations and so on. So it is important to observe the time so that you ensure that you submit your proposal within the required deadline. The best practice is to submit early enough. Don't wait the last minute to submit your proposal. Then we also have the review criteria, which is also another important aspect when you are applying for grants. Usually a grant will be reviewed by a review committee, and they have a certain criteria they look at when they are reviewing the proposals from the number of applicants. So in summary, it is important to understand the application process so that you are well prepared and you'll be able to submit a competitive proposal. So by understanding the funding landscape, you can identify the most promising funding opportunities and maximize your chances of securing the funding for your project. So in summary, that's what we wanted to cover about the landscape and the application process. In the next video, we'll cover more about preparing your proposal and so on before you submit to the organization or funder. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next lecture. Researching funding opportunities. So in this lecture, you are going to understand the importance of researching funding opportunities for your organization. You'll be able to understand also the steps that are involved in doing research on the funding opportunities. So the first thing you have to do when you get to the organization's website is to review the eligibility criteria for each potential funding source. This will determine if your organization or project is eligible for funding. So let us look at a sample of what we mean by an eligibility criteria. So this is a grant offered by the National Institute of Justice Research. Now the eligibility is as follows. If you are an for-profit organization other than the small businesses, you can apply. If you are a state government, you can also apply. If you are non-profits having a 501 in brackets C and 3 status with IRS, you can also apply. You can also apply if you fall under the category of private institutions of higher learning. You can also apply if you are unrestricted. You can also apply if you are a Native American tribal organization. You can also apply if you are a small business. If you are a Native American tribal government, you can also apply. If you also belong to county governments, you can apply. If you are a non-profit that do not have a 501c status with IRS, you can also apply. This one is also for schools, independent school districts. It's also eligible for special district governments. If you are a public and state-controlled institutions of higher education, such as a university, you can also apply. If you are a public housing authority or Indians Housing Authority, you can also apply. If you are a city or township government, you can also apply. So that's the eligibility. Before you apply any grant, it is extremely important that you go through the eligibility criteria. Then after going through the eligibility criteria, you conduct some research about the funding organization. This is where you are required to visit various sources that will give information about the organization. For example, you need to know about the mission of the organization and their funding priorities. We'll also be required to learn about the recent grants that have been awarded by the organization. So for most organizations, if you can visit their websites, you'll be able to learn about the mission, vision, and the funding priorities. If it's education, you'll be able to find on the website. If they are focusing on environmental sustainability, you'll also be able to find such information on the website. Then the next thing you want to do is to review the funding guidelines. You want to carefully review the funding guidelines on the website or the grant website. So for each potential funding source, you must ensure that your project is aligned with their goals and priorities. So if you are in the area of education, you must ensure that you find a funding source that aligns with those kind of objectives and so on. Then you should also try and seek advice. You can get advice on the funding priorities and guidelines by asking experts. You have experts in your field or industry, you can always try and reach out. You can also try and reach out to grant recipients because they might have very valuable information that can guide you when you are applying. For example, if you are a student you want to do research in a particular health field. Maybe you would want to seek advice from a professor or a senior research fellow who has been awarded funding in a similar field or using the same organization. So advice is also important in this process of application. Then you should also stay informed about the funding opportunities. So getting updated information is nowadays very easy. You can visit websites. You can also check databases such as grants.gov. You can also subscribe to funding organization newsletters so that you keep getting latest information. For example, you can be informed when the grants have been approved, and you'll be able to know whether your application was successful or not. Then in summary, by researching the funding opportunities, you will be able to identify the best funding source for your project. You'll also be able to increase the chances of securing funding. Additionally, taking time to go through your research funding opportunities also demonstrates to the organization you are seeking funds from that you are indeed a committed person to the project and you have a clear understanding of their priorities. So that will be all for this session. Next, we are going to focus on developing a proposal and then submitting to your funding source. So thank you so much for watching and see you in the next lecture. Lecture 4, Understanding the Application Process. So in this lecture, you are going to learn and understand the application process of different funding organizations. So the first thing you want to do is that you review the application requirements. Once you've arrived on the company website or foundation website, you will be required to go through the application requirements. Now on the application requirements, there are important things to look out. One is the deadline for application. Then the second item is the format and what you are required to attach. For example, for some applications, you may be required to attach your certificates or recommendations and so on. Then you are also required to carefully review the requirements to ensure that you have everything you need to submit a complete application. You don't want to do anything incomplete in this process. So after reviewing the requirements, the next step is to prepare a proposal narrative. Now at this point, you will be required to write a clear, concise, and compelling proposal narrative that explains the problem you are trying to solve, the impact of your project, and how you will plan to achieve your goals. Now for a more detailed tutorial on how to craft a good and winning proposal, I have a more detailed course for that. Those who want to go deep into writing a good proposal, you can sign up for that course. Then another thing is that you need to create a budget. You should prepare a detailed budget that aligns with your proposal narrative and demonstrate the financial feasibility of your project. Now when you prepare a budget, you must include the important items. For example, if you are going to require computers and other IT equipment, you must indicate, and your budget must be realistic. If you are talking about things like transport and accommodation, you must have realistic figures. Don't try and exaggerate figures when you are doing your budget proposal. Then another step is to submit your application. Now the application must be submitted as per the requirements, and it should include the proposal narrative and budget. This should be done by the deadline so that you don't get locked out of the application. Then once you've submitted your application, it is also important to do a follow-up. Now follow-ups can be done through various means, by reaching out to the funding organization, and you can just try and ask whether your application was received and if there is any status update, and you'll be given such information. So in summary, by understanding the application process, once you understand such a process, you can be able to increase the chances of submitting a competitive proposal that will meet all the funding requirements. So in the next lecture, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process on how to craft a winning proposal that will make you secure funding to your selected organization. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next lecture. Lecture 5 is about proposal writing. So class, now you've found an organization, a funding organization. You've read about the eligibility criteria. You know you qualify. Then you've understood the application process. Now the next step is writing a proposal that will be submitted to the funder for review, so that you can be considered funding. So in this lecture, the objective is to help you understand the elements of a clear and concise proposal. It is after understanding the elements, it's upon understanding the elements that you can develop a clear and concise proposal that will persuade the funders that you are indeed the right person to be given the money to execute your plan. So the first element of a good proposal is the introduction. Now in your introduction, you are supposed to state clearly what problem are you trying to solve, and what is the impact of that particular project. So I will give an example. If your focus is on matters about environmental conservation, you want to state that your project is going to help in the conservation of a particular animal or plant species. For example, if you are focusing on an endangered species, you want to narrow down to what is the endangered species in this case. For example, if you are a plant or animal insect specialist, you want to do a project on saving the monarch butterflies. So you will state in your proposal that your project will be focusing on the factors that can help to save the monarch butterfly species. So that is about the introduction. You're supposed to state the problem clearly, be very clear and be very specific on what you want to do and how it will impact on the society or the surrounding community. So once you have a good introduction, the next element is to describe the project. So when you're describing the project, you want to be very clear on what the project is about. Now this should include the goals, activities, timelines, and expected outcomes. So I will still use the example of environmental conservation. If you want to save an endangered species, your goals will be to improve on the habitat of the endangered species. If you are working on butterflies, you want to say that you will create more education, you will create awareness, public awareness about the habitats for the monarch butterflies. So what are the activities? You want to describe the activities here that you are going to be doing. For example, if you are going to be conducting seminars, you should state clearly that your project will be conducting seminars, or your project will be doing experiments. And then you have to be very clear about the timelines. When exactly are you going to undertake this work? So for example, if it is within the month of July, we are supposed to indicate that the project is expected to commence in July and end in September. So by that you are being very clear on the timeline. Then the expected outcomes, you are supposed to also to explain or state clearly what will be the expected outcomes of that project. Outcomes can be in terms of will produce articles, will publish research, will come up with a product, and so on. So that is about the project description, which should be very clear to the review committee. Then you should also explain the need and significance. Now when you are explaining the need and significance, here you are trying to show the funders that indeed your project is worth, the need is there. For example, once you have explained your problem, you want to show that the project will provide a solution to the problem you have identified. For example, if you have identified drug abuse or alcoholism as a problem in a particular community, you want to explain that this project will be significant because it will come up with tangible or practical strategies that can be implemented in schools or institutions, or you want to come up with programs that will help young people to learn about drug abuse. So that's about its needs and significance. Then in terms of methodology, methodology is a very important element when you are writing your proposal. Now the methodology is where you explain and describe how you will do or implement that project. How will those ideas materialize? So at this point you want to describe the methods that you will use in order to achieve your project goals. Now this will include the steps you will take and the resources that you will need and the timeline for each activity. So if a project is about collecting data, maybe you'll need to explain how you will design questionnaire tools that you will use for data collection. You'll also want to explain how you will present that kind of data so that it can be consumed by the public. And you should also explain the timeline within which each data activity will be done. For example, for academic projects, you will want to explain for how long will data collection take, how long will you analyze the data, and how long will report writing take before you publish the final results. Then it's also important to have the aspect of evaluation and impact. This element requires you to explain how you will measure the success of your project and the impact that it will have in terms of solving the problem. So evaluation is a very important aspect of any project, and the funding organization will want to take their money to somewhere where they see the value. So you have to demonstrate that your project will be of value and it can be evaluated. So you should have systems for evaluating and the impact. If your project is about education, you want to show the funders that the target group is getting information or is learning about new things, new programs, and that change is happening in such target groups. Then budget and sustainability is also a very important aspect of your project proposal. Now for budget, you have to clearly state the items. This should be informed by the major activities. So for example, if it's about data collection, you want to explain that data collection will have these activities and this amount they will cost. So you'll also need to show that the project that you're undertaking is a sustainable project within the periods that you have indicated in your proposal. So in conclusion, just sum up. When you are concluding your proposal, you sum up the key points of your proposal. The summary should include the problem statement, the objectives, and how you will carry out the projects in terms of methodology and the expected outcomes of that particular project. So this will be persuasive and you will be able to get funding. So in summary, when you do a clear and a concise project proposal, you are simply trying to persuade and convince the funding organization that your project is worth of funding. Remember that your proposal will be reviewed by people. There is a committee that will be put up to review your project proposal. So you ensure that you focus the key elements of the proposal, and this will increase the likelihood of your proposal being approved. So thank you so much. In the next video, we are going to look at the best practices, or once you submitted your proposal, what next? So things like follow-up and the best practices will also be useful to know. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next lecture. So guys, welcome back to lecture 6. Now in our previous lecture, we talked about the steps or the elements of a good proposal. So now you have written a full proposal. Now the next step is how to submit that proposal. So in this lecture, the objective is to help you understand and identify the steps that are involved in submitting a proposal. You'll also be able to understand why it is important to submit a well-prepared proposal, so as to increase the chances of securing funds for your project. So the first thing you want to do is to review the application guidelines once more. Now with this, you are required to carefully review the application guidelines to ensure that you have followed all the requirements. Some of the requirements include the deadline, the format, and the attachments. Okay, so your proposal has to be formatted according to the recommended guidelines, and you have to provide the necessary attachments. If you are required to provide things like photographs of your proposed site, then you need to attach such documents under the attachments. If you are required to provide proof of certificates or proof of funds, maybe you are required to provide proof of funds that you have in your account or previous transactions that you've had, then it's extremely important that you organize all those attachments so that they are available for uploading when you start submitting your proposal. So another thing is that you need to proofread and edit. Proofreading, I will emphasize, a very important aspect of submitting your proposal. Now, when you proofread, you are trying to improve on clarity. You are trying to improve grammar and spelling errors to ensure that your proposal is readable. Usually, proposals that have grammar and spelling errors are considered to be not to be up to the standards. So ensure that you can use the right tools. Like if you we have free tools like Grammarly, and we have the free tools like the Microsoft Word spelling and grammar checker. So you can make use of that as the tools. Other than using the tools, you should go through the work yourself. Read all the sentences to make sure that they are making sense before you submit your proposal. So proofreading is extremely important. It shows that the work has been done by a professional. And one thing I want to emphasize is that the type of audience you are submitting this proposal, these are people who are scholars. Usually organizations will put their review committees to have people who are well versed in certain areas, people who have excelled in academia. So it's extremely important to know that you are presenting a proposal to an already learned audience. These are people who will start criticizing every mistake if they come across, and it can be used as the basis for disqualifying you because of things like lack of clarity. And your work, if it's full of grammar and spelling mistakes, it is usually said to be unreadable. So proofreading is something you can work on and improve the quality of your proposal. Then assembling the required attachments is also another aspect. So you should gather any required attachments. This may include budgets, letters of support. We have resumes of key personnel. So in terms of letters of support, you might be having recommendation letters from maybe supervisors. You may also be having recommendation letters from other government organizations or agencies you've worked with before. Now, key personnel, people who are going to be the principal investigators. If it's a research-based project, you need to provide the resumes of such personnel, the key personnel that will be involved in the execution of that project. So that's about assembling the required attachments. Then once you submit, you will be required to confirm receipt. To do that, you should follow up with the funding organization where you submitted your proposal, and they'll be able to confirm that they have received your proposal, and you can inquire about the status of your application. So in summary, by submitting a well-prepared proposal, you ensure that you have met all the requirements. You can increase the chances of having your proposal accepted if you meet all the requirements. Additionally, if you follow up after submitting the proposal, it shows the organization that indeed you are a committed person and you are really looking forward to work on the project, and it also demonstrates that you are professional. So thank you so much. That's much we can talk about on that. Our next video will be on tips. So thank you so much and see you in the next lecture.